All right, welcome back to Digital Marketing Masterclass. We have Let's Talk About Brand host, Christine Gritman. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, but one of the things I always seem to get ahead. One of the things I always seem to do is get ahead of myself and dive right into the topic. Tell me a little bit about your podcast. Tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about your company.
Absolutely. So I'll do that kind of in the reverse order.
Okay.
Back in like 2015 and 2016, I was a journalist, and that's kind of how I got into using social media as a tool, first of all. Previously, I'd just kind of been using it personally, as we all do, and personal branding. Personal branding just kind of emerged in my life during that time as a journalist. And so I left my journalism job in May of 2016 to start Christine Gritman Inc. And it did not start as personal branding. I started out doing social media for small local businesses, specifically restaurants. I then realized that wasn't as scalable as I wanted unless I wanted to hire people, which I didn't. So then I switched to teaching small business owners how to do their own social media better. But soon what people were really noticing about me and really asking for my insights on was personal branding, because some of what I did for myself was really strong personal branding, and that really kind of led to that. So I made a hard shift into personal branding as my specialty in 2020, though it didn't seem like that hard a shift, because again, people already associated it with me and me with it.
Sure.
So I was just kind of following the way things were already going. So personal branding became my focus in 2020, because the whole reason I got into any of this was because there's people out there doing really incredible things and they don't know how to be seen. And I seemed to sort of get how to be seen and how to help other people be seen. So that's how the personal branding element started. And when I made that shift into becoming, personal branding girl, I also changed my show. I'd had a live stream for years called Social, and it was kind of, general, very mixed bag. And when I came back with the show September of 2020, I said, you know what, completely different show. It's going to be all about branding, not just personal branding, but everything is applicable to personal branding for sure. And so that's Let's Talk About Brand. It started out as a live stream, but it is now a podcast primarily. I'm on the Adweek Podcast Network, so those podcasts drop every Monday. And I still do video for it, though. The videos show up on YouTube on Fridays. And in between, and this has been all along, when it was a live stream, now that it's a podcast, all along, it has always been accompanied by Chat About Brand, which is a Twitter chat on Tuesdays. And even though Twitter chats are kind of falling by the wayside, I love them because I want to hear other people's takes on the topic. I interview an expert on my podcast, but I really want to get my community talking about the week's topic and what it means for them. I want their insights as well. So that's where Chat About Brand comes into the picture.
That's great. That's great. Now, one of the things that I started to see is this metamorphosis. So I started this company around 22 years ago. And what I started to see is I started to see a lot of business leaders start to understand that, the branding didn't just stop with their corporation. And what they never thought that they signed up for as a leader, was to say, I have a personal brand. But whether they like it or not, they were already out in the field. Usually the CEOs were the leading salespeople. They were driving the vision or they were driving the product. And so they had all of the raw potential and the energy. But I do find them say, well, now what? Is that a familiar story for you?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, so some of the people who I've worked with have been solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, business owners, and then some of them increasingly are people who actually work within a company or corporation. And either way, regardless, they kind of say, well, I don't want me to be the story. I don't want to be the story. I want, my clients to be the story, or the brand to be the story, or, what we do to be the story. And, that is what you sell. What you sell really is, the thing that you do and how it impacts the person who's buying it. But the fact is, like it or not, and I always have to paraphrase Bob Burg here, all things being equal, people prefer to do business with and refer business to people who they know, like, and trust. And those three words are really why the personal brand is key, because no matter what your company does, no matter what type of brand it is, B2B, B2C, service, provider, whatever you do, someone else does it too. Someone else may do it as well or better than you do. Someone else may do it in the same way that you do. I love saying we're all unique, but the fact is other people do things pretty similarly. The core differentiating factor is you and the feelings people have about working with you. That know, like, and trust factor. They know the brand, hopefully. Maybe they trust, maybe they like that what the brand's vibe is. Maybe they trust that they'll do good work, but the real deciding factor is the personal element. Do they know, like, and trust the person who they are going to be working with or who is presenting the brand to them? People trust people so much more than they trust brands. There have been studies after studies after studies on this, and it's only moving further that way. The more we are constantly bombarded by brand messaging, the more we sort of recoil away from that, and we really trust the humans more than the brands.
Now, did you find that, the COVID era kind of accelerated the personal branding?
It accelerated all branding, especially online, digitally. 2020, I was still working with small businesses at that point, and it was my best year in business because all these small businesses that had been on the fence as to whether or not to get online, they were like, well, I know I should, I know we're supposed to, but it's just one more thing, and I just don't have the bandwidth. They recognized in 2020 that it was sink or swim. It was get online now or you won't have a business anymore. And that extended to personal brands as well, especially since with all those businesses, dying or struggling to survive, what was one thing that made businesses, well, there are several things, but one of the things that really made businesses succeed if they were going to is having people rooting for them, is having people who really were invested personally in having that business be there on the other side. And what do we invest in? It's not a matter of, oh, I want that business to be there necessarily. It's I'm rooting for that person's story. I want that person to not lose their business. I'm rooting for that person to succeed and thrive through all of that. So that's one way that it helped for the small businesses I was working for at the time. But also, professionals, and we're seeing it now with all the layoffs as well, a job may not be there tomorrow. People saw that in 2020. People are seeing that now. A job may not be there tomorrow. The company you work for may not, even if they feel loyalty towards you. I'm not saying companies have no loyalty. Some do. But the fact is there's budgetary concerns. There's a lot of reasons why you could lose your job tomorrow. So if you don't have a brand in and of yourself, if you don't have some level of being the thing that people want, you're really going to be at a disadvantage in this sea of talented people who are also looking for work. So it is definitely, I think that 2020 and the layoffs of now both showed people that, you really want to make sure you've got your own back. And that if you do lose your job, if your job is not there tomorrow, you have something to springboard you to the next step. And that something is often that know, like, and trust factor that you have with your network, that you have even with people who you don't know. If you have a strong personal brand, people may know you who you don't know. Like, that's one of the hallmarks of really having that strong personal brand and professional reputation that can help springboard you into whatever's next. So instead of just falling, you'll bounce.
Well put. Well put. Last week we had Joe Polizzi. He was former.
And I saw him live last week. I just saw him at CEX.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, he's been on the show twice. I run another podcast called Digital Marketing Masterclass with Andy Crestadina. And
saw him too.
Yeah, he's a good egg. He's a good egg. One of the things that Joe always talks about is it's not just about flipping on the camera or whatever it is. You have to have your tilt. You have to have your edge that's going to make your content stand out and be special.
Yeah.
Because let's say hypothetically you snap your fingers and everyone has their own personal brand. It's going to get very noisy very quick. How do you coach individuals how to have their own tilt, their own unique perspective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to dig into part of what you said, there's so much content out there, right? So, like, creating content is not your point of difference, especially not now. 10 years ago, maybe, but nowadays, nope.
Yep.
So make sure that there's a reason that people should give you their attention, because attention is the most limited commodity right now, and everyone is trying to grab it. So, people see those studies saying post this many times a week on Instagram, this many times a week on Twitter. Again, social media is where I kind of focus, but it also goes for, blogs, it goes for video, it goes for newsletters, anything you've got. They say, this is the optimal frequency and this is the optimal quantity. And, that's just based on broad strokes demographics. It's not your audience. You know what the best frequency and timing is for your audience? When you have something to say. So really I encourage people to be consistent. I mean, don't be sporadic and just kind of tossing out messaging whenever you've got it. Do have some consistency. But I think less and stronger matters a lot more. And I saw this in my own content strategy. I used to be very strategic with it. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do this on these days and this on these days. And I had this whole structure. And it was just noise. Like, it wasn't sinking in because people weren't seeing it. There was so much of it that people just it wasn't being served up to them on their timelines. They literally weren't seeing it even though they were following me. And so I made that shift, again, 2020, big year. I made a shift towards, I'm really going to focus on Let's Talk About Brand. This is going to be the thing. Let's Talk About Brand, the show, and also the Chat About Brand chat. And suddenly people thought I was doing more. People said, oh my God, you're doing so much more. You just amped up your content strategy. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm doing less, so much less. I'm just doing it better. It is stronger. People are actually seeing it. Since they're actually seeing it and consuming it, it means they're coming back, which means they're informing those algorithms that it's something they want to see. So I would say, come up with what you can do content-wise that you can stick to and start smaller. You can always build. You can always do more later, but I feel like it is better to master something and to get something strong and to get something people know you for and come back to, and then you can always build off of that, as opposed to throwing a million things against the wall and then kind of, reining it in. I think it's best to start small and strong and consistent and build from there. In terms of tilt and difference, that's also going to be part of that. That's part of the strong content strategy, is why you. If you are having the exact same conversations that someone else is having, if you are putting out the exact same set of tips that someone else is putting out, what's going to make them remember that they got that from you? What's going to make them remember that it was your piece of content that they saw? Because the way I always describe a personal brand is it's the version of you that lives in someone's head. But the fact is, if the content lives in their head, but you don't have a brand, and your content is not serving that brand. Your content is a one-off. Your content is itself. It is not part of your brand. So in order for your content to build your brand, people have to remember that it came from you. They have to remember the element of you that really made it appealing and unique to them. And a lot of times, I know a lot of people want to hide their personalities because they want to fit in, or they want to seem more business-like, or they want it to be about the work, not about them. I'm sorry, you are the part that's going to stand out. You are the part that's going to help them remember that it was you.
Let's get down to some tactics. So when you go and you start to build your brand, tell me about your promotional strategy, or recommended promotional strategy. Creating the content is just one piece of the puzzle. How are you promoting it? And, kind of go beyond, I put it on social media. Do you have some tactics that you can explain to the audience?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, before you even jump to the content, you really have to have focused on that brand message. Like, what is the one thing you want everything to sort of have big arrows pointing to? And by the one thing, I don't mean your service. I don't mean your lead magnet. I don't mean that. I mean the one concept. What is the one concept that everything points a big, clear, shiny neon arrow towards? And people struggle with that because people feel like that limits their options. It makes them less findable, less hireable because they feel like, well, what if someone wants that? I can do that. I don't want to cut myself off from that. Yes, you do. Because you want to make sure that people understand what your message is and what they want you for. If you have a few different messages, you might pop into someone's head for one of those things, but someone else is going to pop in there stronger. Someone else is going to be like, well, this is their whole thing. Right?
Yep.
I mean, myself, I used to not only, do social media for people, I used to do websites. What? That's not what I do anymore. What I do is help people figure out their brands. It's very clear. It's very succinct. And I have a conflicted messaging situation going on myself right now because I'm also looking for full-time work in another arena. So I need to work on this. I need a session with Christine Gritman. But I'd say really before you even get the content going, make sure everything is pointing that big shiny light at the same concept that is yours and that is ultimately your brand message. And then when it comes to promoting the content, again, consistency is really key. I suffer with this again. The cobbler's children have no shoes, but it's good if people can get used to looking and finding you at a certain time in a certain place. I'd also say don't make your messaging on every platform or every promotional tool you use identical. It's so easy to hit one button and have the exact same post go everywhere, but the thing is, what makes a good Instagram post is not what makes a good tweet. What makes a good tweet is not what makes a good Facebook post. What makes a good Instagram reel is not always what makes a good YouTube short. You want to make sure that every piece is at least a little bit tweaked so it is optimized for the platform that it is on. So, I mean, the ultimate messaging should be, consistent for sure and recognizable, but just those little tweaks. How do people communicate on a given platform? What breaks through? And another thing to also keep in mind that's universal for all the platforms, all of them value engagement. So if you put something out that's basically a billboard and flat and for, passive consumption, it's not going to do as well anywhere as something that sort of pulls people into the conversation, makes them tempted not only to click and consume what you're trying to get them to consume, but hopefully to, comment on it, have conversations about it, ideally even to share it themselves. That's what you want to go for. So when you're putting something out there, take a look at it and see if people can see themselves in it. If people can see themselves in that post, they can see that call to action, or they can feel that invitation to weigh in. You don't have to ask questions with every post. That gets a little redundant. But make sure that people see clearly, oh, here's what I'm supposed to do, and here's why the heck I would want to do it.
You mentioned reels and shorts and stories.
And TikTok, of course, is in there too.
Sure.
I just don't think of it because I'm not into TikTok, but it's hugely important for most people who aren't me.
Now tell me when you prescribe that to one of your clients, what's the kind of the KPIs or the goals of that? Are you finding that? I'm finding that a lot of the social media platforms are all in an arms race, and TikTok is sort of like this has created this shockwave that a lot of platforms have to follow, really cashing in on low attention span. Are you finding that the reels and the shorts are actually probably getting more value than longer form content?
It really depends. Again, everyone's audience is different. So everyone's audience's consumption patterns are going to be unique. The only way to really find out what your audience prefers is to give it to them. And again, I don't believe you should necessarily give everything to them just to see what works. You should also take into account what you won't hate creating. Really, really big on that. Because, if your audience wants short form, but you hate creating short form, that's not how you're going to show up the best. And it's going to show, and you're going to start, slacking on it, and it's not going to be optimal for you. So I say first and foremost, create what you don't hate creating, and that's the format that'll work best for you. But, it is absolutely worth it to be aware of consumption patterns, not only because of the audience, but also especially because of the algorithms. We all saw people were super mad at Instagram last year, and they've rolled it back a bit because Instagram was really shoving reels down everyone's throats. And people were like, look, we want feed posts to still matter. And they've rolled it back a bit, and now people who were succeeding a lot with Reels are kind of mad. They're like, wait, we're losing that algorithmic bump. But that
Yep.
always happens with new formats. I remember live video on Facebook used to be like the silver bullet towards getting, a ton of views.
Yep.
And then once everyone started doing live, and it was no longer the shiny new thing, and the algorithm recognized that and sort of made it less of a thing, it's always going to happen. It's always going to change. The best you can do is look at what matters to you. If what you want is that big algorithmic bump, and there's nothing wrong with that, then yeah, you do need to always be nimble and exploring new content styles. If what you care more about is consistency, not only in your own output, but also return viewers, if you care more about people coming back, if you care more about being a destination and being a brand that they care about and look for, rather than getting a ton of new eyeballs, then, keep doing what you're doing. So, again, it depends on what your brand is actually looking for. And again, there's the fact that some brands, they don't care so much about impressions or comments or shares or likes or whatever. What they care about is one thing: clicks. Some brands, that's what they're going for. So in that case, look at what is getting you those clicks. It might be the same thing that's getting a ton of reach.
Sure.
It might not be. Like, it's entirely possible that the things that are getting reached that people are watching and consuming are not what they're clicking on, and what they're actually clicking on is when they go back to your profile and click on one of your feed posts. I mean, one of your grid posts on Instagram. That's just one platform example. But I would say, keep in mind what you're looking for. It can't be everything.
Yep.
You can't say, I want so many impressions and everyone to comment and then go click. Yes, we all want all of that, but what are you really optimizing for and why? Because what content you do is going to be impacted by that. Though again, with the caveat that what you don't hate creating and what you can make consistently is always going to do better for you no matter what.
Now, do you find that the investment in the native platforms, I'm sure you're going to say it's different for every case and stuff like that, but do you find that the investment in the native platforms probably has a better reach than when you are putting so much content into your actual website? And the reason why I'm saying that is that one of these things that I'm finding is social media every single day is just putting us in a spot where they are trying to do whatever they can to have people not leave the platform. And so what I'm finding is that when we work with a lot of companies, we put so much energy towards putting really great content on their website for SEO reasons. And it's almost like you almost have to do double the work because they think, well, I'm going to promote it on Facebook. I'm going to promote it on social media channels, and people are going to find value, click, and leave. And what I'm finding is that you're fighting against two different things at the same time. And so unfortunately, the duplication of effort is worth its time because you're going to maximize those eyeballs a whole lot better if you're not trying to force the social media platforms to basically make you leave, because that's the opposite of what's in their best interest. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. Again, different platforms have different levels of being annoying about that. LinkedIn is notorious for that.
Yep.
LinkedIn really hates it when you have a link, which is ironic because I feel like it's a platform that makes the most sense to link out to articles and to, thought leadership pieces and,
Yep.
white papers and whatever. So I think that's a weird call on their part, though it actually has shifted. The people who study these sorts of things have actually noticed that LinkedIn's algorithm is less hostile to links than it used to be. But regardless, your basic premise is absolutely accurate, which is that platforms want people to stay on the platforms. One thing I will point out about that, though, is the meta properties. So Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, but I don't deal as much with that as a business platform. When you click on a link in them, they often don't bring you properly to the link itself like it would on your browser. It's still sort of within Meta. Like they have their own sub-browser situation going on so that they can continue tracking your activity.
Yep.
So that's their workaround. So it has gotten a little less hostile to links on Meta properties for sure because they've still kind of got you. But what we're really getting at here when we talk about putting the rich content on your website versus on social media itself is the concept of you shouldn't build on rented land. So obviously the
Sure.
advantage of bringing people to your website is they're on your website. That has advantages from data collection standpoints and, Google Analytics and all of that and trackability and retargeting.
Yep.
But it also has the advantage of it's your website. They're in your environment. They have shown up at your virtual office and they can click around and find other things there as opposed to on social media. If that piece of content only lives on social media, first of all, it's kind of standalone, but more importantly, it could disappear tomorrow. We all know people who've gotten locked out of their business accounts and cannot get them back. So you're investing in building something that could be swept away instantly. It's not like websites don't go down too, but it's a little less common, and the social media sites ultimately do belong to the social media sites, whereas your website does belong to you. So it's really a tricky one, and yes, it depends. Everything depends, but the thing it specifically depends on is what you're trying to drive. Again, if you're trying to drive the eyeballs, social media is going to get way more eyeballs than your website is generally, unless you're doing a ton of SEO optimization. But again, websites are good for SEO optimization. So if a lot of your traffic that's relevant does come from Google and places like that, or from backlinks or whatever, then yes, that is more valuable if you're going for those more valuable traffic as opposed to more traffic. There's also ways of getting around it. I know people who have made incredible use of Twitter threads, for example, where they'll put not the whole piece, but a lot of really enough to really deliver actual value in the format of a thread.
Yep.
And then to hear more about this, click over to this
Yep.
link. So there's ways of combining it so that you're not just giving a teaser and you're not just saying, hey, click over to this thing. You're giving some of the value on social media, but then you are ultimately letting them know where they can go. Or maybe if you want to avoid the link thing because, they hate links, you could even, verbally say that it's on the blog or something like that, instead of providing an actual link. And if you set up your profiles correctly, it'll be nice and easy to find.
Yeah. Got two more questions here. And this one here is more of a story, and I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this. Have you ever heard of a soccer club called PSG, Pierre Saint-Germain?
Ooh. No, I haven't.
So that's the biggest soccer club in the world, at least from a monetary standpoint. It's not even...
Where is it?
It's in Paris.
Well, then it's a football club.
That's right. Wink. I'm a huge soccer guy, football guy, and it's literally
Football is life.
It's owned by the country of Qatar. That's how big the club is. It's not owned by a person or a sheik. It's literally the entire country owns it. But what they noticed this phenomenon is to get these players that have these colossal salaries, they were starting to add up all the expense of the club, all of the everything from the stadium down to the employees, whatever that was. And then when they added these ridiculous salaries, it actually cost more than all of those expenses cost more than the club was able to bring in. And so you started to think, well, how is that even possible? And how can this club continue to grow? And what was very interesting, and I saw this in the documentary, is that the personal brand of each of the players has this value that goes beyond their tenure there. And so what they're literally willing to do is they're willing to pay upfront more money to these players so that their brand can stay forever. So let's just say, hypothetically, in American terms, if you knew that Michael Jordan would be Michael Jordan and Michael Jordan's shoe, that what does it make, $4 million a minute or something like that? That concept of personal branding is what this club did. And so what you're finding now is that clubs understand the power of personal branding so much that it's literally built into the revenue model of how they make money. Think about that. That's never been in history. That's never been so. It's like the brand of the club or the franchise has always been bigger than the players in it. Now they're flip-flopping because the technology companies are willing to pay out so much. You know, it's just
And another thing that story brings up is flexibility. Because, if you only looked at Michael Jordan as a basketball player, his only value would be playing basketball. But instead, they recognize that one of the values of a personal brand is that you can apply it to all sorts of different things because the valuable thing is the brand. So that shoe, how long has it been since Michael Jordan has been actively employed as a basketball player? A very long time. And yet the shoe is still bringing in crazy money because the shoe isn't tied to his job. The shoe is tied to his brand. And the shoe is not tied to the Chicago Bulls. The shoe is tied to the personal brand. And that's true for a lot of things. It's been true in athletics for a while, but by a while I mean a few decades, so not super long in terms of human history. But
but
absolutely, you go back to the days when celebrity spokespeople first started being a thing, so not quite 100 years ago, but it's been a while. Really, the 50s are when it really picked up for sure.
yeah.
And that was still, the brand was bigger than the person, but they recognized that people who were not yet interested in the brand could be brought in by the person. So that was just the beginning of it. And I love how you point out that now it's almost flipped. Now people who are are really into the person more than into the brand that that celebrity is working for. And it's an interesting shift of power, and brands that recognize that it can be a good thing if leveraged properly, not a bad thing, are the ones who are going to win. You mentioned Joe Pulizzi before, and his whole thing now is about the creator economy. And so that really has put the power into the hands of personal brands in a lot of ways. Instead of brands coming to creators and saying, all right, here's what you need to do, and here's 1,000,001 parameters, and we're just kind of using you as, an extension of our creative team. Instead, you're seeing, look, you're the expert here. You are the one not only with a following and a brand, but you have that following and brand because you know what the heck you're doing. And people know, like, and trust that you know what the heck you're doing.
Yeah.
So help us.
Yeah.
Help us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great shift in the whole journey of personal branding.
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I interviewed a gentleman named Paul Rotzer. Do you know Paul Rotzer?
Sounds familiar, but I don't
So
personally
he
know
was
him. Is he the one involved with AI?
the AI marketing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, it's the same format as CMI, but it's AI based. And so I got on the AI bandwagon like way before it was cool. You know what I mean? Now keep in mind, we were all floored when OpenAI wasn't just like a moderate uptick from all the AI platforms. It was a massive leap.
It was just suddenly boom.
Exactly. But not only do I talk about the power of AI, but I also talk about the ramifications of AI. And I am a firm believer that large company models are going to go by the wayside, and you're going to start to see like almost the picture of small business in America, and even the picture of large business in America is going to be a ton of shops of 4 to 5 individuals. And what you're going to
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things when AI can transform like the thought workers and knowledge workers so much, it's going to be one of those things where all of these companies are going to basically reduce their manpower because of how quick this is going to hit. They're going to reduce their manpower, and what it's going to do is, while it's going to feel like, hey, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, it's going to displace a lot of jobs, and it's going to create a lot of opportunity. But what you're going to find is just people working out of their homes are going to be able to bring a lot of value. And when you marry that with a personal branding message, when you have AI, the ability to do things as a small shop that large companies can do, multiplied with personal branding, I think the next wave is going to be very, very interesting. I think it's going to be a whole new landscape for how we operate, how we think, how we communicate. I think you haven't seen nothing yet.
I'm intrigued. I'm behind. I'm behind actively on the AI wave, and I know it. But I like what you said, and that's a really good point. They'll use the smart places, the ones that will actually succeed here in this new model, are the ones that, like you said, will retain some of those thought leaders, because they recognize that AI is a great tool for scaling. AI is a great worker bee that replaces the need for all those other worker bees.
Yep.
But you still need a great mind behind it in order to create something that stands out. Because if everyone's using the same AI technology, then things are going to sound very samey. In fact, that's what a lot of detractors are saying about the early AI stuff. You know, it sounds very genetic, very samey. I read one person saying that he put a prompt into AI specifically to reject the ideas that the AI came up with, because they said, well, AI can come up with that. What can we come up with that's different? So I think that smart companies will recognize that differentiation is more important than ever in this age of AI. But yes, they can replace a lot of the worker bee stuff. But I hope that they enhance the prioritization of actual creative minds who can not only put in unique and really specific driven prompts, but can also then take what the AI does and not just slap it out as done, but can use AI as an assistant as opposed to a replacement in that kind of way, where you still have someone brilliant and human putting their touch on it, putting their standards on it, and yeah, so it's really going to be interesting, and a lot of brands are going to fail there. A lot of brands are just going to say that AI is replacing their people, and you know what? It's also going to replace their difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think that, I forget where I heard it. I'm sure that it's said by someone very popular and very influential, but one of the things they said was that, you know, if AI can replace your thought leadership, then you were never really a thought leader.
Amen.
You know, and so there's going to be this glass ceiling of where AI can reach. And if your ideas
It's a tool. It's a tool for creators. It is not a creator. And a lot of people are misunderstanding that, but it is a tool for creation.
Yeah. Yeah. Final question. Back in, this is not early internet, but this is early social media. There was a platform called Klout. Do you remember Klout? Now,
Yep.
Klout kind of fell by the wayside, but I've always thought that there would be another system very similar to Klout. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That everyone's individual brand, their individual influence, or at least their small business influence, was going to be measured in a meaningful way. And I literally thought that you would start to apply for jobs and you would report your Klout score. I thought that
People have done that. Those people got laughed at, but people
Yeah.
did do that.
I believe that Google knows and has scored the influence of every single man, woman,
I think you're right.
soon to be child. And I think it's just inevitable.
I've got a highly influential child. What are you talking
Yeah, that's right. Well, I do have to say child, because I got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they're addicted to Minecraft and Roblox. And they
Yep.
watch these videos, but it is funny that they do gravitate to the same kids who make these videos. And these
Absolutely.
kids have already made more money than I'm going to make. And I've started this agency 22 years ago. Like
Yeah.
these two girls, they're sisters, and they just play Minecraft and talk to each other about the most senseless stuff, and they're making $33 million a year. So
Yep.
yes, I do mean man, woman,
kids
and
are
child.
slackers.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, it's one of those things where
One of my pandemic projects, actually, in 2020, I did almost start YouTubes for both of my kids. So my son is a really good artist, and what he watches on YouTube all day long is other artists. Like, they're
Yep.
sitting there, they're live drawing, they're talking about their work. Some of them are making,
Yep.
you know, Fakemon regions and stuff, and he does that. So I'm
Yeah.
like, we got to get you doing that. But he didn't like the performative aspect of it, so we didn't really do it. And then my daughter got very into baking, and she was watching baking YouTubers. So we tried doing a baking show for her, but at the same time, you know, it's a performance thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, she was 6 at the time. You know, she'd take forever to, like, you know, put the flour in and stuff. And it's like, okay, you don't have the pace for YouTube.
I mean, yeah, it's funny. I mean, you got to have a pretty decent editor to, yeah. No, when it's so funny, you talk about a tilt on the baking side. My daughter watches this one video, and the video is just baking, but this person got really creative, and all of the tools, all the baking tools, are like super miniature, almost like dollhouse size.
Aww.
So they're creating real things like creme brulee, and it's like the size of your thumbnail.
Like a mini baby one.
and I kid you
Yeah.
not, like multi-million views for every single video. So you had this baking story where you would have been, hey, join the other ocean of bakers out there. But this person was like, hey, what if I did it in the most miniature way possible? Would it change things?
My daughter watches the opposite. There's this one called Make It Big. And this
Yeah.
guy is like, I'm going to make the biggest, not the biggest pizza pie,
Yeah.
the biggest slice of pizza and things like that.
Yeah.
And that started out, I think it started out as a mini series run by Tasty.
Okay.
But it became its own series. It became bigger. It got acquired. It's its own show. Like it's amazing how these things happen. Someone just kind of finds their tilt, finds their creator moment, and the things that they do, you can't
Yep.
replicate that with AI. But you
No.
can maybe use AI as a tool to
Yep.
help promote it.
Well, I also think once your tilt is unique enough, anybody that copies that tilt just looks like a plagiarizer. And that's what's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's what's fun about when you do things and you do it right and you do it with your tilt and you do it with your angle. It's your own self-protection eventually too, assuming that it takes
And
off.
if you're known, you're
Yeah.
going to have those fans who spread that far and wide. You don't have to go and say, hey, that person's copying me.
Yep.
Someone else will go, oh, that's such a ripoff of this person.
Exactly.
And then new people will discover you. Like, you will have a fan army, hopping up to defend
Yep.
you and to spread the word about you did it first.
Yeah, yeah. And especially on the platforms like Reddit and stuff like that, they're like white blood cells.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the time has really flown. Tell us a little bit about if our listeners want to find out about you and your branding services and your podcast, where do they find you?
Absolutely. Well, all of it can be found at gritman.com. That's Grit, like when something's gritty, like sand, MON, like Monday. So gritman.com. And that will lead you to everything. I'm most active on Twitter, C. Gritman. And I'm also pretty active on Instagram, especially Instagram stories, also C. Gritman. I've been slacking on Facebook, but Christine Gritman Inc. YouTube, Christine Gritman Inc. And the podcast is on the Adweek Podcast Network. So you can go to adweek.com/podcasts. You can find Let's Talk About Brand there. And again, Let's Talk About Brand, the podcast, is also there on my website with everything. Oh, and find me on LinkedIn. Yay, LinkedIn. I'm Christine Gritman. I'm also Christine Gritman Inc., but Christine Gritman is more interesting. So connect with me as a human. Tell me you found me here. I will say yes. And we can learn from each other.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thanks to our listeners. As you know, with Digital Marketing Masterclass, it is our mission to find some of the greatest thought leaders in marketing that are transforming businesses, shaping minds, and doing all of the magic that we just heard for the last hour. And Christine, you're absolutely one of them. Thank you so much for joining us. To everyone else, like, subscribe, click on the notification bell, all that stuff, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching this video. What I wanted to do now is share something with you that we believe is very special. What we wanted to share is something we call the Ferretic Unique Process. What you'll see on this page is this is our entire roadmap that we've built over the last 21 years. We implement this process for all of our inbound marketing clients, and we believe that if you implement some of these strategies into your own marketing, you're going to have tremendous results. We've developed this page to be not only in video format, but also text and chapter format as well. When done effectively, this process is going to help your organization build marketing systems that generate leads, nurture leads into clients, and then convert those clients into raving fans of your product, service, mission, and vision. If you have any questions or concerns about anything that you've read, or you would like to kind of walk through this with one of our specialists, please reach out to us. You can do that at info@ferritech.com. So once again, the domain to find out our unique process is ferritechuniqueprocess.com.